In this episode of B.Hooked Knitting, we're going to knit the Stockinette Stitch. My name is Brittany, and I'll be your guide throughout this tutorial. For the supplies list and written instructions, please visit knitting.bhookedcrochet.com/stockinette. Let's begin. The stockinette, or the stocking stitch, is one of the most traditional knit stitches that you'll find out there, and it's one of the first stitches that beginners learn how to do after the garter stitch. Before we dive into how to work this really simple stitch pattern, I wanted to make you aware of a couple different things. Now, what you see here is a little gauge swatch that I'm working on right now, and you can see I have a garter stitch border along the sides and along the bottom. The reason for that is the stockinette stitch has a tendency to curl on itself. And so typically whenever you work this stitch pattern, you'll find that you'll have a garter stitch around the border to help control that roll a little bit. When you're working the stockinette stitch in a flat piece, you're going to have a 2-row pattern repeat. So what I've done here is I've just knit my first 3 stitches to continue my garter stitch border. Row 1 of the stockinette stitch, you're just going to knit every stitch. And this is the right side of the work. Row 2 of the stockinette pattern repeat, we're going to be using purls. Now what I've done is I have knit my first 3 stitches for that little garter stitch border. My working yarn is coming from the back because I just worked a knit stitch, but now we're going to transition to purls. So I want to just pull my working yarn in front, insert my needle purlwise, so from back to front, wrap the yarn, and finish my purl. So we're going to purl all of the stitches on row 2 of our stockinette pattern, except for if you're doing a garter stitch border around the edges. And to continue with this nice little stitch pattern here, the stockinette stitch pattern, all you're going to do is repeat a knit row followed by a purl row and a knit row and a purl row and so on until your project is the right size. Now this is if you are working in a flat piece where you're turning back and forth after every row. But what if you're wanting to work the stockinette stitch in the round? Things are a little bit different there. Let's have a look at that. Now what I have here is the start of a little hat that I'm working in the round, and you can see I have a couple of different stitches. Once again, I have a garter stitch border, and that's because the stockinette stitch likes to roll. And so for the brim of this hat, I want it to be a little straight rather than curling up on itself. So that's where you see the garter stitch border here. But then you see this traditional stockinette stitch. So how do we do that when we're working in the round? It's actually much easier than when we're working in a flat piece because we don't have to purl at all. To make the stockinette stitch in the round, all we do is knit every stitch, just like this. Now in contrast, if you're wanting to make a garter stitch border in the round, that's when you're going to alternate a round of knit stitches and a round of purl stitches. So you can see things are the opposite for this stitch pattern for the stockinette and for the garter stitch when you're working in a flat versus when you're working in the round. So we just saw how to knit the stockinette stitch both in a flat piece and in the round. And there's a couple of other resources that you're going to need in order to actually work a project with this stitch. You're of course going to need to know how to cast on. I have a video tutorial available for that. And once you complete your project, you're going to need to know how to bind off. I also have a video tutorial for that. You can get the links to both of those tutorials, which of course are very beginner friendly, in the description below this video, or you can find them at knitting.bhookedcrochet.com/stockinette. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I really look forward to serving you in the next episode of B.Hooked Knitting. Stay tuned for that. Thank you guys.